content marketing is just about blogging. That is absolutely not true, and I'm going to talk you through why that is. Hello and welcome to Engage and Thrive, also known as Eat, your coffee catch-up with me, your host, Taelon, where we will go through common problems and hurdles that come up in business, marketing and advertising and try and demystify them. I know firsthand how complicated and confusing it can seem with all the different acronyms and all the things to do in business. So let me try and help you be better in business. First things first, let's start with grabbing a coffee. Content marketing is so much broader than people may realise what is classified as content marketing, and each format serves a purpose depending on your audience segment, your objective of what you're trying to achieve and your customer journey. But we'll go through that further in the takeaways. As always, let's start with vocab. So the first one is content pillars, and I've got a whole section in the takeaway about this, but this is essentially defining your content strategy. The next one is UGC, and I always get this tongue twisted. It's user generated content. So this is created by users, typically your customers who are advocates of your product or your service. This is different to influencer marketing because influencer marketing has a different intent. The next one is content repurposing. So actually taking one piece of content and turning it into lots of different formats and using it on different channels. Another one is engagement rate. So a metric really for measuring likes, shares, comments on a piece of content and how it's doing. And the final one is CR, conversion rate. So the percentage of users that have actually taken an action from your content, whether it's clicking through, subscribing, or even purchasing. So today we're going to go through 4 key takeaways. Number 1, content formats. So like I said, blogs or blogging is just one format in your content marketing toolkit. Other formats, which you may not realize are content marketing, are videos. So whether this is long form videos or reels or shorts, typically you would use this for more storytelling or visual learning. You know, if you see people doing looms, recordings of how to use their platform, in-depth details about their product or service. Another one is infographics. So again, you'll see these, normally they're quite long on a platform, and typically people use them on LinkedIn or Pinterest, and it'll be a summary of information with statistics. And it may be that you then use that as a lead magnet to actually click through to another format of content. Another one is static posts. So if you're posting on Facebook or X, Twitter, or even Instagram, but actually it's just more of a static image or some copy, just plain, it's a static post. Another one is podcasts. So again, if you're trying to engage with audiences on the go or more of an audio experience, that's a piece of content marketing. And the final one really to cover off is ebooks and guides. So you may do this as a more in-depth piece of content if you want to really explain a guide about how to, a form of, it's a brochure format, right? So it's really more detail. If you were giving that to someone, instead of potentially having like a long 2-hour conversation that they can take away and read at their own time when they want to. So one thing that I've already obviously mentioned is that each format serves a different purpose. So it depends on your audience, depends on your brand, and the different parts of your customer journey as to when you would use each different format. The next one, number 2, is content pillars. I like to call these your themes. So basically, by having clear defined content pillars, make it so much easier to actually strategically align the different content you're going to be producing and making sure you're staying true to your brand goals, your target audience, and essentially your brand personality. Trust me, it's very, very good to have. And even if you have 2 content themes, it's worthwhile. And then a lot more can be fluid on the go. To give you some examples of content themes. So you might hear people talk about evergreen content. This is typically your long-lasting content. This may be your brand awareness, so FAQs or people may ask about your product or service, your locations, a bit of history about your product, how you started, maybe about your team, about your founders. This is your brand awareness BAU content. Then another content pillar you may want to have, which again you'll see used commonly, is educational content. This is more of your how-to. This is your webinars. This is your guiding your audience to more in-depth detail about your product or service, or your flavors, or your menu choices, or your delivery options, or your features if you have an online product. Another one that people may come up with as content themes is behind the scenes. So again, this may be how your product is made, or if you actually have lots of different suppliers in your supply chain and you want to talk about those suppliers because you're an eco-friendly brand, and so you're talking about how it's sourced from the farm and how it then is passed through and what you're doing and how you then sell that on to the customer. This, again, you may want things like your team to produce. It may be more on the fly, not as perfect, a bit more rough and ready. Another one that you may have as a content theme is inspirational content. So this may be success stories, testimonials, case studies, and user-generated content. This is really bringing to life real-life examples of people using your product or service and how they're feeling about it. So really creating that emotional connection. Right, number 3, repurposing content. So this is really fun, okay? The point of repurposing content is really to save you time on having to create lots of different content for your different content themes. So if we take an example that you've created a blog post, and then to promote that blog post, you may create social media posts to drive traffic to your blog. Or you may create an infographic which summarizes your blog, again, pinned on Pinterest, for example, or posted on LinkedIn to then drive traffic to your blog. Another example is if you've hosted a webinar or a live, you may take that live content, which may be like 10 minutes, half an hour, and actually snip it up into smaller segments. So 30-second sound bites from your webinar, your live, which you're posting as video format on Reels, on YouTube Shorts, on TikTok, etc. And another one is thinking about if you were doing a podcast, right? You may have an hour-long podcast, and then you may use an infographic as key takeaways from that podcast. So your checklist or your to-do list. Again, the one thing to understand with repurposing your content is understanding the audience you're trying to attract, what's the best format of engaging them, and the customer journey around it. By repurposing your content as well, you have an opportunity to reach other demographics and audiences that you may not already be reaching. So if you're doing longer form video or podcast, you may have an existing community, but you may want to be building that community and building that audience. So you're using those sound bites or snippets to grab the attention of other people. And the final one, number 4, measuring content. As always, I go over and over about the importance of data. So with all your content marketing, the thing with content marketing is it can be quite time consuming, hence why I'm also suggesting to repurpose content. But especially creating your own content and keeping up with all the different formats that you might want to do, or the changing algorithms and platforms, it can become very time consuming to keep that constant flow of content. So it's really important to make sure you're measuring the success of your content to really understand what's working and what's resonating with your audience. So if, for example, you're posting on social media, you want to be looking at your engagement rate, how many comments, how many likes, how many shares a post is receiving, or even how many click-throughs you're getting from your link in bio or response to direct messages, or if it's on Facebook, an actual click-through on the post. Again, if you're posting them videos, if it's longer form content and it may take you like an hour to record a piece of content, what's your view time? What are your questions being asked? And then is there any traffic being driven from that? Would you do it again? That's always the thing to think about when you're looking at all this data with the content is, what would I do again? What was worth the time and effort to actually get your return on investment? I should have put that in as a vocab. But essentially every piece is about, as a business, you need to think about, is it worth the time to continue producing it? And now for the final bonus piece. So I touched on this slightly at the beginning, but user-generated content, UGC. I always say UCG, but UGC, user-generated content, is the most valuable piece of content marketing you can get, you can have, ever possible. Because this is, you haven't asked for that review, you haven't asked for that testimonial. Well, you may have said to someone, can you post a review for me, or can you rate me? But them actually taking the time and effort to create a piece of content about your brand and you haven't had to spend that time and energy creating that content is so valuable. And also, again, that's humanizing your product or service with someone else talking about their experience, not just coming from the brand. This is the most valuable piece of content marketing you can ever get, you can ever use. And if you're getting user-generated content, use it. Repost it, share it, like it, love it, comment on it, make sure you're tagged in it, just do everything with it, because this is the most authentic piece of content you can get from your real life customers. So as a wrap up, content marketing is more than just blogging. I'm not saying don't do blogs, and you're probably already doing all these formats of content marketing without realizing. And I'm hoping these takeaways really help you in defining your content marketing strategy, setting your pillars, understanding your audience, understanding your customer journey, and just remember what's relevant to your brand personality, your tone of voice, who you are, and being authentic. But thank you for joining me for another episode of Engage and Thrive with your host Taelon, and see you next week.